Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. Last week I showed you a video where I processed everything that I had from one of my shelves in my sewing room. There was one piece of fabric left and I said I was going to use that first up. So what I have here are two pieces of furnishing fabric. It feels like a wool, but I'm really not sure what it is. They were already pre-cut, so I'm going to use them as is. We're going to be making a cushion, so I have the two pieces of fabric, a zipper. This is a little bit too plain for my liking, so I'm going to dress it up a little bit with some bias binding. So I've got some scrap bias binding. I'm just going to use that. Let's see what we can do with it. All right, to start with, I have two pieces of fabric that are 46 by 41 centimetres or 18 by 16 inches. I'm just going to work with what I have here, and we will trim this back a little bit later. The zip I'm using is a 35 centimetre or 14 inch dress zip, and I'm just using a piece of 1/2 inch bias binding or 12 millimetres. This came out of a deceased estate and I've just got tons of different bias bindings. It's time to use something up, I think. So I think I'm going to keep it nice and simple. All I want to do is run some diagonal strips down the fabric and space them apart evenly. And all I'm going to do is sew down both long edges of the bias to keep that in place. So it's going to be really simple but effective. I think the first thing I need to do is with one of my pieces, I'll start by marking in some diagonal lines and then try and determine how far apart I'd like them spaced. And I don't think I need them too close together. So I think that looks about okay to me. That's about 2.5 inches apart, which is around 6 or 7 centimetres. Now that I have my first line marked, I'm going to use the 2.5 inch line on my ruler and line that up over that line that I've already marked. So along here, that's 2.5 inches in, and the next line will be 2.5 inches away from that. And then I'll do the same thing with this line. I'll place my ruler over the top of that and keep marking the same increments. I can turn that around and we'll do the same for the other side. Or you know what, wouldn't it be nice if I went the other way? Yeah, let's do that. Okay, let's do something a little bit different. So that's my centre marking here. I'm going to take a straight edge from the ruler here and line that up on that centre line, and I'll line it up with the top corner here and mark a line down to here. That's going to be different. Let's have a look and see how it turns out. So from that first line, we're going to do the same 2.5 inch increments. And I'll turn that around again. And from this line here, I'm going to come out 2.5 inches again. That is going to be an interesting design. What we need to do is place our bias binding down on these marks first, and we're going to end the strips along here. Then we're going to put one really long strip along here and along the other lines that we've marked as well. And by doing this first, this strip is going to hide the end bits. All I need to do now is take my bias binding and line that up over the centre of that line we've marked, and you can pin everything in place. And I would just do this section first and overlap this so that it can be stitched in without any frayed edges. If you have double-sided tape, it's going to be much better than using pins. I have a tendency to stab myself all the time. So what I will do is place some double-sided tape over each of these lines, and it'll make it easier for me to sew the bias binding in place because it's not going to shift or distort the way pins might do. And I don't think I need to do the end bits because that's just going to make it a little bit bulky, and I'll probably be trimming that anyway. I can peel the paper off and I'll start applying these bias strips. I'm not going to waste my time fiddling with unfolded edges, so I'm just going to find a smaller section that I can place the bias over. I was originally going to use some old men's ties and make a Dresden plate applique to go into the centre of this cushion, but I think this is going to be much more simple and very effective as well. Now that we've secured all of these layers in place, I'm going to take this to the machine and sew down the long edge of each of these strips. Although I've used double-sided tape, if you don't have access to that, then all you need to do is pin your fabric in place and just be careful that it doesn't distort as you're sewing. But with the double-sided tape, this should stay in place nicely. Let's go sew it up. All right, it really doesn't matter whereabouts you start, so this looks like a good spot. And then go straight back up to the top and do the other side. I won't bore you and make you sit there and watch me sew all of these strips down. You get the idea. All I'm doing is sewing just beyond that centre line that I've marked, and when I come back and sew the other side down, it'll hide any of the untidy ends. So I think that's already starting to make the fabric look a lot nicer. So what I can do now is trim off these ends here, and we want to trim it back so that this fabric, when it is overlapped, it will be centered over that line, and you want to take off at least that much, but I plan to go into the center of the bias binding strip. So now what I'm going to do is run some more double-sided tape along here and the other markings, and we'll do the same as we've done with these ones. Okay, let's hope I have enough bias binding. I have a feeling I don't. And I do not. I might have to change colours. All right, I've managed to find another one, and pink and green will look perfectly fine together. Remove the tape along this one, and then we'll line up the bias binding the same way we did before, but we've just got to be careful that we catch all of those end bits. And if it does stick out a bit, you might just need to trim it back. I had just enough material to finish the job. Okay, we can take this back to the machine, and just like we did with these pink ones, we're going to sew straight down the long edge of the green strips. I'll do this one first. Of course, if you change fabric colours, you'll need to change your thread too. Nearly sewed over it in pink. And then we can do the rest of them. Okay, the bias strips have all been secured in place. I might just mention I'm not actually going to be lining this cushion cover. Really just couldn't be bothered today. I just want to use up these 2 yellow pieces of fabric and be done with my mission of cleaning out my fabric cubicles. So I'm being a little bit lazy today. I'm going to set this aside and we'll take the other piece, and this is going to be for the back. So we need to put a zip in, and I've got 16 inches across here, 18 inches across here. I'm going to put the zip across the short edge. I'm going to cut off a strip that is 5 inches wide or 13 centimetres. So that's 16 by 5 inches. And the other piece we have left is 16 by 13 inches. I'll set that one aside for the moment. Let's find the centre of our fabric. We'll find the centre of our zip, and we will also line up the centre of the other piece of fabric as well. Grab your zip, and we're going to place this face down onto our fabric, and this is going to be the right side up. So if we had a printed piece of fabric, you'd have the printed facing up. Line up the centre markings, secure that together, and we can go and sew all the way down that edge. If you like, you can open the zip out. All right, we've got that side sewn in. We can take this side now and place that over the top here. So we'll line up that centre mark with the centre mark on our zip. So that's evenly placed along the side of the fabric, and you can see that this side here lines up evenly with the side edges of the fabric as well. Now I'm using quite a lengthy zip here. If you prefer, you can actually go 1 or 2 inches shorter. Cushions have a tendency to compact really well, so you'll be able to stuff anything in there with even a smaller zip. We can sew that in place as well. So I've got the shorter piece sitting on the top here. This side of the zip has already been stitched in place. Just move the zipper tape out of the way as you get to it. And I'm starting off at the closed end just because I can. As I get to the top end here where the zip slider is, I'll raise my presser foot, push the slider behind it. Sometimes you might have to manoeuvre your fabric around depending on your machine. All right, with the zip stitched in place, we can close that up, take our shorter piece and fold that over. We want this sitting nice and flat, and just pull that out to the side so that the zipper tape here will sit nice and flat against the fabric here. What we're going to do is from this edge here, we're going to sew from the outside edge up along here and just come up beside the stitching that we've already done. We'll do the same at this edge here. I'll pull that out so that it sits firmly, and I'll just open up that slider. We want the middle of the zip facing to the side, and at this end we're also going to sew up to the side of the stitching line. So if you had a much shorter zip, you'd be coming in a lot further. So we'll go from the outside edge up along here, and you'll just come in a couple of inches or so. Do the same on this side here. Just sew until it's comfortable. You may not get much further than the zipper tape. So I've got that sitting nice and flat there. The top layer of fabric is pulled away so that that makes this stitching sit flatter. And depending on how narrow your zipper foot is, you'll be able to come up a fair way. So if you can come up a little bit, that'll be great. Back stitch. So that one's done, and you can see that that's nicely finished on the edge there, and that hides the zip that we've got underneath. Let's go to the other end and repeat. And just make sure when you sew that the end of your zip doesn't sit within your cushion area. Mine has, it's actually shifted, so I've got to undo that and move it back across again. And to stop that from happening again, I'm just going to move that out of the way. And restitch it. So let's see what we've got here. You may not be able to see this very well. So I've got a stitching line here from when we've installed the zip, and then this stitching line here is about 1 or 2 millimeters away from that one. And what that's done is enabled this zipper area to sit within our seam, and as you open that up, you've got a nice neat edge here. Then what you can do, close up your zip. We can fold this short piece over, and when you fold that short piece over, we want this to be folded to the back as well. So you'll fold this over and have that seam or that fold faced down. So on this end here, we've got all of this facing the larger piece of fabric, and you'll just evenly press this down so that it covers that zip you've got underneath. So on the larger piece of fabric, we're going to have a fold over the zip, and then the other side will sit nice and flat. And just here at the end of the zip, so we don't want to sew anywhere near a zipper head, and you don't want to sew over the metal bars. So I'm going to start here. The metal tab on my zip is just about here. I'm going to start sewing from here and come down this side where the folded section is. So all the way along here. I've got the metal staples on this side here. I'm going to come up about 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 an inch or so before those metal tabs or staples. So start here, come down, sew along here, and then sew up here. And that's really just going to secure this fold in place and make that sit a lot nicer. So move your slider out of the way if you need to. I'll start sewing right on that fold. Turn your work around and just double check that you've got your fabric sitting nice and flat over the zip. You don't want it sitting over here. You want that fold covering that zip completely. And then sew down to the other end. As you come to your slider, just move that to the back. And then I'll come up to the mark I've made, which is before the metal staples, and backstitch. All right, this is quite a thick fabric, so when it's folded over it does look a little bit bulky. When you're using a cotton fabric, it's going to sit much nicer. So that is the back of the cushion cover done, and we've got the zip hidden away on the inside there. And we can now trim both of these to size. I want to cut my fabric to be 16 inches square or 41 centimetres. So I'll trim this back now so that it is 16 inches square. And I can trim off all those tail ends of bias tape as well. So I already know that this is 16 inches. All I need to do is tidy that up. And make this one 16 inches in length as well. So all I've done is lined up the 16-inch mark on the edge of my fabric and trimmed off the rest. And this one here I will square up as well. So we've already got 16 inches across there. and I can trim off the excess from the larger piece of fabric. Now it's time to put these together. Right sides will be facing. This is the right side, that's the wrong side. Let's open our zip and we'll place the fabric together. If you've got a cushion with a rounded edge, you may want to round your corners, but I don't, so I won't. All right, that's all ready to be stitched together. Double check that you've got an opening to turn this the right way around, and we'll sew all of that closed. Once you've done that, if you've got an overlocker or a serger, you can go and neaten the edges using that. If not, and you've got a zigzag stitch, then you can do a zigzag stitch all the way around. And if you're doing that, I would have a short stitch length and a wider stitch width. I'm going to have a 1 centimetre or 3/8 inch seam allowance. As I come to a corner, I like to back stitch a couple of stitches, forward again, then I'll turn, and then go forward and back and continue on. Just helps reinforce those corners. This is where the folds of fabric for the zipper meet, so I'm going to triple stitch over that. And with that all done, I'm going to clip my corners, then I'm going to overlock the edges. Okay, we've finished the entire cushion cover now. So I've sewn the edges together and then I've overlocked the fabric just to neaten it all up. Let's turn it the right way out. And once you're happy with that, grab your cushion insert and we can pop that inside. So here's one I've pinched from a cushion that I've already got. Fold that in half and then you can stuff it in. And once your cushion is nicely stuffed in there, we can close up the zip. You can see that that's nicely hidden by that flap there. Let's have a look at the cushion. Wow, look at that. I've got to say, I actually really like this. When the fabric was sitting flat and I put the second colour on there, I wasn't too impressed, but I absolutely love it. What do you think? I absolutely love how this boring plain piece of yellow fabric has turned out. I didn't really have much of an idea when I first started. I was going to do all the diagonals just in one direction, but I'm really pleased how that has turned out. I love it. And that means that is the absolute finish of one pigeonhole that I've managed to empty of all of the fabric, and I've turned it all into something. So this was the final piece. That means I've ended up making 40 products out of that one little cubicle of fabric. I'll pop a link to the video I'm talking about in the description below and up here somewhere, so you can go and check it out. There was lots of fabric strips and bits and pieces, and I've gone and processed every single skerrick of fabric that was in there. I'm over the moon and very happy with this cushion. Makes me want to make more. Makes me even want to use bias binding again. Not. I hope you've enjoyed this video and I shall catch you next time. Bye for now.